Big, beautiful booby trap.
Welcome to the Booby Trap Podcast. Wine, films, murder, where wine flows like secrets and murder is always on the menu. I'm Tata Bat.
And I am Mamie Mellons. Tonight we got murder, mayhem, and two of the sweetest of little ladies you never suspect.
That's right, we're serving up a tall glass of elderberry wine with a dash of arsenic, strychnine, and cyanide. Buckle up for Arsenic and Old Lace, 1944.
Tonight's poison, pairing, is blueberry wine from Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurant. Sweet on the surface with just enough dark undertones to make you wonder what's really in the glass. Perfect match for two charming old ladies with a killer recipe.
Just be sure there's no arsenic, unless you don't like your dinner guests. So obviously looking at the wine, it's a very dark purple, maybe a little ruby. It smells like blueberries. It tastes like blueberries, but it definitely more, I don't know, like port.
It has antioxidants because it's blueberry.
Ooh, so it's actually healthy, extra healthy for you.
Yes, we're aging in reverse.
Very nice. I feel healthy already.
Yes, I do too.
So, what would you pair this with?
My first would be a steak. I tell you, these type of wines in kind of the port family or very strong, flavored wines like this, and almost flavored, but red or flavored wines like this can really stand up to a really good steak. If you had a steak, baked potato, that would be my first choice.
And I don't know why, because I always kind of think maybe like a drier wine for steak, but I guess I don't really tend to eat steak and wine all that often. So because this is a bit sweeter.
Lots of pepper. You put lots of pepper on it. On the steak. I don't know for sure because I've never paired this. It tells me when I drink it, I feel like eating a steak. But I think it's enough to hold up to a lot of pasta would probably be really good. Anything that is bursting with flavor because this can hold up instead of some of the white wines. If you do very flavorful like foods that are bursting with flavor, the white can kind of get lost.
Yeah, I was also thinking. I think because like a blueberry jam or something like that, when you have something like a cheese, like I was thinking kind of cream cheese, but something more tangy than that, right? So some kind of like soft cheese that has a little bit of tang could really complement it really well too.
I could have this for breakfast with French toast. Oh my!
Oh,
they give me an excuse to have a glass of wine for breakfast. I haven't had one of those yet.
I mean, that sounds like a very nice idea.
Or pancakes.
We are having pancakes for breakfast. Blueberry pancakes too.
This would be the best excuse to have wine for breakfast that I think I could find.
Okay, we can do that.
I better set it over here then because.
So tomorrow morning, blueberry pancakes with some blueberry wine.
Anything can happen.
So when we think about our rating, how many wine glasses would you give this out of 5?
You know that I'm a sucker for these type of wines. So I'm going to give it a 5, and I'll tell you why. This could be ridiculously unpleasantly sweet. It really could be. It could be drinking like the syrup that we're going to have on our pancakes or toast.
Right.
And it's not.
No.
It holds its own without going into this syrupy. And I've had those wines where they're some type of these type of wines where they're not a grape wine but a fruit wine or a chocolate wine. There's actually chocolate wines out there. And they're almost undrinkable because they're just over the top. This is not.
Yeah, I mean, it's sweet, but it's not overly sweet. Anything that's super, super sweet, that's a no-go for me. But I will say this is actually not too bad. I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5 just because, once again, I don't really like sweet wines. But this is something that's, I'd say this, it's sweet, but it's kind of at the cusp of like, if it was any sweeter, it would be too much.
It'd be too much. It'd be too much for anybody. That's why I suggest the steak and the pepper because that pepper and that kind of spicy, a good spicy steak, good peppery steak, garlic and onion and that kind of thing would just take all this and tone it and make it. And I love it when your wine rating goes below mine because that means I get to clean up at the end of that.
That's true.
Because you don't like it as much. And I'm like, okay, well, just slide it this way.
True. I think it tends to go the other way.
So I end up waking up later than you in the morning for a very obvious reason. Because I was on the cleanup detail, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, with that, so you said a 5 out of 5 wine
Yes, ma'am.
glasses. I gave it 4 out of 5 wine
Oh,
glasses. So with that, cheers. So let's go ahead and return to the film story.
So, in the 1944 film Arsenic and Old Lace, it all starts with Mortimer Brewster, played by Cary Grant, who's a writer on the futility of marriage, just risks his reputation and got married, and stops by his sweet old auntie's house in Brooklyn. But instead of finding cookies and knitting,
He finds a dead body stuffed in a window seat.
turns out Aunt Abby and Aunt Martha are serial murderers.
Wow.
Oh, no, we're up on my alley now, aren't we? And have been murdering lonely old men with poisoned elderberry wine, strictly out of charity, of course.
And they're buried 12. That's right, 12 in the basement with the help of their bugle-blowing nephew, Teddy, who thinks he's President Teddy Roosevelt, and he's digging the Panama Canal for malaria victims.
Enter Jonathan Brewster, Mortimer's psychotic brother with a stitched up face and a fondness for a body count.
So it's chaos, it's comedy, it's corpses in the cellar.
So in this, Cary Grant stars as Mortimer Brewster, author of a book on futility of marriage and recently married. But in his working relationships with Alfred Hitchcock, a few of which we will be pairing with a hand-picked wine, include Suspicion, Notorious, To Catch a Thief, and North by Northwest.
Question, what's your favorite Cary Grant film? This one.
Oh man,
It's not Mr. Blanding's really
Oh gosh, oh, now you're making me think. You know, of the two, I think this is still my favorite of the two.
This is definitely a classic, and I think when we talk, I think this is actually what got us together to actually have these discussions about watching these old films, and eventually having this podcast was Cary Grant, Arsenic and Old Lace. There's this connection between us and this film.
Yes, there very much is. And make no mistake, Mr. Blandings builds his dream house. Just watched it a couple of weeks ago. It's a runoff, but this one, I think it's because I saw it before Mr. Blandings built his dream house, which led me to look for other ones. You know, and then you have Bringing Up Baby, and it just kind of go. I love the Cary Grant that does comedy. I think he did an amazing job of comedy. I know he has a lot of his serious roles. Yeah, I'm gonna have to say that this beats up too much, but it is what made me. This movie is what made me go look for other movies, and when he did this.
And I agree. I think I lean more towards his comedy rather than his more serious roles, but he's also an amazing serious actor
He's
too.
Just, so. Oh yeah, there's nothing he didn't do. Yeah, well. But when he does the comedy, there's just I'm sorry, there's just no better. He's you know, granted, you know, it's some of physical comedy. I mean, it's not along the lines of Buster Keaton or something like that which is way over the top, but he just, I think it's because he's so debonair, and to watch him be so over the like he is. This is probably, I have ranked this movie as one of my favorites. So my character, Priscilla Lane, stars as Elaine Harper, and she is as Mortimer's childhood sweetheart and his new wife. Her films include $1 Million Baby, Opposite, wait, if you've heard of him, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, Ronald Reagan. It rings a bell. Film noir Bodyguard, and Alfred Hitchcock, to whom all roads lead to great movies, seem to lead Saboteur. Then we have Josephine Hall, stars as Abby Brewster, one of Mortimer's aunts. Film Harvey with James Stewart. Love that movie too. Yeah. I actually had a 6-foot rabbit when I was a kid named Harvey. Oh. Yeah. So she won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in that movie that she was in. She just preferred to keep her talents to the theater. We have Gina Dare, and she stars as the other auntie, Martha Brewster. In her films, she also preferred to stage the screen and wasn't credited in some screen roles, such as Advice to Lauren in The Naked City, but not much else on her resume there. We have John Alexander, who is wonderful in this, as Teddy Roosevelt Brewster, Mortimer's uncle, who thinks he's President Teddy Roosevelt, and as we said, building the Panama Canal. He was in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Winchester 73, Mr. Skeffington. Well, that's with Betty Davis. Love that movie too. Betty Davis is at her most villainous. and Fancy Pants, which I think I have to spot check this one. I'm going on memory here.
Hope and
Lucille Ball.
Yep, Lucy.
And I think she played Calamity Jane.
No,
Maybe no. But it was a Western.
It was a Western.
Okay.
He was butler, although I think he was a fake butler, and they're a rich family because they're coming from lower beginnings, so trying to become more important in their community, and so part of it was getting a butler. And I think for John Alexander, as he was playing Teddy, right, he would fit right into that group.
Oh, absolutely. He's
So also on like the main, like this film had a lot of good main actors, right? So you have Raymond Manzi. He stars as Jonathan Brewster, who is Mortimer's brother. He starred in The Scarlet Pimpernel and an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents called Roadhog. So a lot more dramatic roles for him. And then you have, is it Peter Lorre? Laurie. Okay. So he stars as Dr. Hermann Einstein, who's Jonathan's companion, and also his facial reconstruction surgeon. He was actually named as one of the best actors who has never received an Academy Award, although he was starring in Best Picture winners such as Casablanca and Around the World in 80 Days. And then, of course, there's a slew of all these secondary characters, which maybe you don't know their names per se, but when you see their faces, you're going to go, oh, that's that person. So you have Charles Lane, who's a reporter, and he's seen in other Frank Capra films like It's a Wonderful Life, You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You also have Grant Mitchell, who's seen as Reverend Harper. He also was in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and also a really great film, Leave Her to Heaven, which I'm hoping at some point we'll get a chance to watch together.
Yeah, me too.
We have Edward Everett Horton. So he's Mr. Witherspoon. He's the most recent victim. He was seen in Holiday, which is another Cary Grant film. You have James Gleason as Police Lieutenant Rooney, and we actually just recently saw him in the 1954 film Suddenly. So he was Pop Benson. He was a former FBI agent.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Jack Carson, who's going to be Officer Patrick O'Hara, and he was seen in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Mildred Pierce, but also a lot of other kind of comedies, I think.
Oh, yeah. She was a very prolific supporting actor.
Yeah.
So, born on Broadway, Arsenic and Old Lace was already a stage hit when Warner Brothers bought the rights.
They even cast some of the they even took some of the cast from the play. So the aunts and Teddy Roosevelt, so Josephine Hall, Jean Adair, John Alexander. So they all were coming from the play, and actually once the film ended, they actually went back on Broadway.
And on stage, Jonathan Brewster was played by Boris Karloff.
So I don't know. I just don't picture him as being on Broadway.
No. I mean, you can't see it, right?
No.
But he wanted to do the movie, but the producers kept him on Broadway, probably under some contractual obligations.
Sure.
It happens. Nearly 20 years later, he finally got his chance in a 1962 TV version.
And I think Tony Randall was in that one. So, and he played a lot of like comedy roles to a lot of like Doris Day, Rock Hudson films.
Yeah, he did.
But if you look out and as you're watching the film, there's definitely a nod to Karloff.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely, keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah. So Arsenic and Old Lace was directed by the incomparable Frank Capra, who did lots and lots of, between he and Billy Wilder, I think they kept Hollywood rolling, right, in the aisles. He was a genius behind the classic It's a Wonderful Life.
You see that during Christmas time every year. God. It's always amazing.
Yeah. But here's the kicker. He shot the entire film in 1941 for World War II. Duties called him away.
So Capra actually admitted that he took the project as a quick moneymaker before going into service. So he shot it in about 4 weeks, I believe, with most of the budget blown to Cary Grant's star power.
And
it's very similar to Romance of the Redwoods with Mary Pickford's, for her budget.
Oh, yeah. Well, and both earned every nickel, right? Yeah. Can you see anybody else doing this? I can't. But I'm also prejudiced. What can I say? So Pearl Harbor actually happened and interrupted the filming. So they wrapped up things pretty fast. Other things to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, so the film didn't actually release to the public until 1944, partially because of a contract with Broadway's the Broadway play producers. So they didn't want the film to steal the thunder from the stage, right? So at that point in time, only servicemen were actually able to see the film prior to 1944 because it was released to the U.S. military in 1941. So once they wrapped up the film, essentially they handed it over to the U.S. military, and so servicemen were able to see it until later on for the general public to actually be able to view it, which is kind of interesting and different for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And you can also kind of tell this was based on a play. A lot of movies that come from stage to screen like that, because if you really think about it, almost the entirety of the movie is within that house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's like what, maybe you have two locations. Well, technically I think there's three, but two main locations, right? You have the inside of the house and the outside.
That's right. And that would work, and that's the way a play would be, right?
Yeah.
CaryGrant called his performance in the film over the top, which is the best part about it. And he's not wrong. He mugs, flails, and double takes his way through it like a man possessed.
And originally, Capra actually wanted Bob Hope or Jack Benny as Mortimer, but there was some studio drama that actually led them to Grant. And honestly, we're not mad about that whatsoever.
Oh yeah, no, I love Bob Hope too. I like on their road to with he and Bing Crosby, road to whatever that road was. No. So even the details in this movie has fight. The elderberry wine murder weapon, inspired by Capra's own mother's recipe. Well, yeah, I'm gonna hope that didn't come with arsenic, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what's also very interesting, so the Brewster's grandfather clock. So it actually keeps real time on screen. So it ticks along with the action, which is very unusual, and it's really kind of like that rare touch of eerie realism. So kind of keep your eye out for that.
Oh, and the basement, or as better known, the Panama Canal.
Right.
Not a single body was ever shown on screen. It's all the horror of that and the murders and all that. It's all in the suggestion.
It's true. Yeah.
Which I like.
Yeah.
I don't need to see how the sausage is made.
Right. Well, I think we've talked about this seeing some of the other films like more recent films, right? Where it's like they're showing every single gory detail. Like honestly, if you actually hadn't shown it, our imaginations can show more horror than even that. Because if anything, it's probably more grossing me out than making me like, I'm scared in horror, type of thing.
And the best movies are always the best films. So I feel the same thing. There's the famous murder scene that never see the murder. Yeah. I mean, not really do you see it. You see
shadows
and simulate.
You have music, you see blood.
And which is chocolate sauce.
It is, yes.
Yes.
FYI.
If that ruined it for anybody, I am so very sorry. If you never eat Hershey's chocolate sauce again, I apologize for that too. But it's all, I love movies like that. So, I
agree.
You go, girl.
So, you know what? We're going to go ahead and watch the film now. So if you'd like to join us as we watch and discuss the film Arsenic and Old Lace, go ahead and check out our accessory reel. This is a bonus companion track. Otherwise, go ahead and continue with us, and we're going to provide you with a few snippets from the film, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss some of the criminal themes we have identified throughout the film Arsenic and Old Lace, 1944.
But there's a body in the window seat.
We know.
You know?
To do with Daddy. Mortimer, you just forget about it. Forget you ever saw the gentleman. Yes, dear. Let me see now. This is 11. Abby. No, dear. This makes 12. Abby, dear, I think you're wrong. This one is only 11.
No, dear, because I remember when Mr. Hoskins first came in, it occurred to me that he'd make just an even dozen.
But Abby, dear, I really don't think you should count the first one.
Oh, I was counting the first one, and that makes it 12.
It does? Well, dear, for a gallon of elderberry wine, I take 1 teaspoonful of arsenic, then add half a teaspoonful of strychnine, and then just a pinch of cyanide.
Should have quite a kick.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have killed him just because he knows something about us. What happens? That's...
Come to him for help and he tries to shake us down. Besides, said I looked like Boris Karloff.
Different faces. I give him another one right away. That last face, I saw that picture too, just before I operate, and I was intoxicated.
Stephen, what you've done to me, even my own. They think I'm...
Johnny, you are home in this lovely house. You know how many times he tells me about Brooklyn, about this house, and about his aunts he loves so much. They know you, Johnny. Please tell him so.
Well, Jonathan, it's been a long time.
Large as life. He's there waiting to be tied up and gagged.
Welcome back. We just finished watching the film Arsenic and Old Lace from 1944. We're going to go ahead and start kind of going through our crime analysis. What are the criminal themes that we saw throughout the films? One of the first ones we're going to look at is the fact that, there's a female serial killer, Amy Duggan Archer Gilligan, America's most prolific female serial killer. So she was actually cited as the inspiration for the story. She had been charged with poisoning the deaths of her two husbands, as well as allegedly responsible for approximately 60 or 66 deaths of other elderly inmates in her nursing home. And her weapon of choice, arsenic. In her family, there was a history of family mental illness. A couple siblings have been in mental institutions. So she had actually gotten married, and her and her husband and their small daughter moved to a town in Connecticut, and this is in 1901. And so they were actually living in the house of this man who was, was a frail guy who they cared for in exchange for room and board. His name was John Seymour. And when Seymour died, the Archers actually rented out the house from his heirs, and then they turned it into Sister Amy's nursing home for the elderly. Eventually, they ended up moving. So in 1907, they actually founded the Archer Home for Elderly People and Chronic Invalids in Windsor, Connecticut. And they didn't have any problem filling their home with lodgers, or inmates, as they were called during that time period. The boarders paid weekly fees between $7 to $25, or they could pay a $1,000 life care option. So obviously a lot of people chose the latter. And most of the lodgers were going to be elderly, somewhat infirm, and many of them didn't have any close members that were living by them. Like I said, she had two husbands, both died. You have James Archer, who in 1910, supposedly he died of natural causes due to kidney disease. But it was interesting that Amy had taken out an insurance policy on him a few weeks before his death. The policy benefit enabled her to continue to operate the Archer Home. And then her second husband, Michael Villian, he died in 1914 after 4 months of their marriage. He died of heart failure and acute stomach issues, and essentially left his entire estate. But it was deemed later on that the will was actually a forgery in her own handwriting. A little suspicious on both accounts. And then between 1907 and 1917, there were 60 deaths at her home. So there were 12 from 1907 to 1910. So that's when her first husband was still alive. And then 48 from 1911 to 1916, in which, she was obviously under a lot of financial stress because she, had lost her husband. She remarried, but at that point. But
Nobody's going to notice that, right?
Why not? Why would they, right?
Yeah. I mean,
people, it's an elderly
reason,
home,
yeah. Well.
So obviously their suspicion was growing. There were frequent deaths. There was financial pressures on her. And also, interesting enough, she had repeated arsenic purchases.
World's dumbest criminal.
There was a gentleman that lived there, a lodger. His name was Franklin Andrews. And so in 1914, he actually, died suddenly. So he was actually pretty healthy compared to a lot of the other people that lived at the house. And he was actually also very close to his family. So he wrote to them often about his new life. And he happened to mention that there was quite a lot of deaths that were happening in the home. And so it was actually found out that he had been killed. He had very high arsenic levels in his own body. His family reached out to the newspaper, the Hartford Courant, and they investigated. And they actually ended up doing an expose called The Murder Factory. There's multiple articles about it. And one of the things that they did is they investigated the poison registers that were at the drugstore. So the drugstores were required by law to keep these poison registers. And so they found out that Amy had been making all these purchases of arsenic at the drugstore. And she was citing rat problems and bed bugs, both of which I wouldn't want at my resting home, but
I don't think you kill bed bugs with arsenic. Maybe
I don't think so either, but who knows?
maybe she was talking about the elderly gentleman. She just referred to as bed bugs.
Possibly. So obviously there's this pattern emerging, right, from these causes of death at the Archer home. And so there are different, stomach issues and then sudden death. So it didn't take a huge leap of imagination to get to the idea of poisoning. So, kind of revisiting the poison registers, they revealed that Amy had purchased 10 ounces of arsenic just before her second husband's death. And supposedly that's enough to kill over 100 people. So obviously, at that point, there's enough evidence. So they provided it to the state police and they started their investigation. They actually exhumed several former residents of the Archer home and they examined their bodies. For example, they testified that Franklin Andrews' stomach contents contained enough arsenic to kill half a dozen strong men. May 1916, Amy was arrested. She was originally charged with 5 murders. Trial was in 1917. She was convicted of 1 murder, which was Franklin Andrews, and she was sentenced to hang. And then in 1919, they did a retrial. She pled insanity. She was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life. I don't think that she would have been able to do the irresistible impulse defense, which we talked about in our other episode of Anatomy of a Murder.
Right.
By 1924, she was transferred to Connecticut's mental hospital, and there she remained until her death in 1962. So once again, estimated victims was over 60 elderly residents plus her 2 husbands. The murder weapon was arsenic, but one interesting point was that her daughter suggested that she was addicted to morphine. So I kind of wondered if maybe there might be another possible idea there. What was interesting, though, is that this case actually led to Connecticut licensing laws for elder care homes. So that happened in 1917. So immediately after this happened. So essentially, there would have to be inspections and annual reports of deaths submitted to the State Board of Charities, obviously in an effort to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Coming back to this film, so Joseph Kresselring, as a boy, he actually heard about the story. He read about it when he was younger. He went to Windsor, Connecticut, read newspaper accounts, looked through old records, and he wrote his play, Arsenic and Old Lace, based off of this case. It opened on Broadway in 1941, had a 3-year run, and then followed by, obviously, the film with CaryGrant.
So, as you mentioned, the murder weapon was arsenic poisoning. The auntie's homemade wine was laced with arsenic, strychnine, as she humorously said, just a pinch of cyanide. So, use of these poisons were a common means of murder in the Victorian era because they were found very readily. Strychnine was broadly used as a form of pest control. Cyanide was in everything from paints to wallpapers. Arsenic was in everything from fly paper to cosmetics.
So essentially, you had all of these poisonous chemicals in everything that you were using every single day.
Poisoning, I mean,
it's surprising that anyone survived, honestly.
Yeah. Well, they didn't survive long.
No.
You have a lot.
Well, that's true. They were living pretty short lives, so and maybe that was a big factor.
Yeah. So arsenic, in of itself, is called king of poison. That's because due to its potency, ease of concealment, and historical use in assassinations. Its lack of color, odor, and taste, it makes it difficult to detect when it's added to food or drink. And its effects can be written off as food poisoning. These characteristics, combined with its availability, contributes to its infamy as a tool, political and personal power struggles.
So when you say it lacks the color, odor, and taste, that makes me think of another movie, The Princess Bride.
Oh, yes.
It's like, was it arsenic? Was it something else?
Yeah. It would have been very easy and a little harder in more modern times just because pathologists, when they open a body for autopsy, if not all pathologists can do it, they have to have, it's kind of almost a special sensory skill, but apparently they can smell it in the internal cavity, and it's bitter almonds. That it smells like it has a distinctive smell, and so when they open somebody up, they know right away to start looking for it. So I guess because of all of these shenanigans, there became an Arsenic Act of 1851 of England, which enforced tighter restrictions on the sale and required most arsenic to be colored in soot or indigo to make it harder to disguise.
That's kind of interesting. Once again, with all these killings, murders happening, right? They put laws in place to try to prevent it, which is a good thing. What's interesting though about this for the arsenic and the indigo, the coloring. So I was just reading something a couple days ago about there's these wild pigs in California, and they happened to open the pig and it was blue inside. What they found is that because pigs will eat anything and everything. So it looks like they were consuming rat poison, but it has the coloring on it, right? And so because the animals are consuming it and it has that dye, it was like changing the color of their insides to a different color. So interesting enough, this is not the first time that's happened. So this has happened maybe 10 years ago. I don't have the information in front of me, but I read this because also we were talking about this film and about the arsenic and about learned about some of this. And it's like, I better send this article to my dad. You know, he went pig hunting and he found a pig that had blue in it. Let's go eat.
Yeah.
But throwing it out there just for awareness purposes, right? It's not close to where he lives and where he hunts, but it doesn't take much to then have animals that are contaminated that kind of move the state.
I mean, have bacon for breakfast.
Yeah.
So I think Tata is pointing to me and just being the poison expert.
Yes, I believe that you're definitely more poison expert than myself.
How you let me fix you any type of meal is really shocking.
Hopefully you won't kill me, but I probably know more ways to kill you though, honestly.
Friendship right there. So we know all the different ways we could kill each other.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, this is why we're nice to each other, right?
Exactly.
Because we both know we have a murder chip.
Pretty much, yeah.
So symptoms of arsenic poisoning are you get gastrointestinal issues, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, dehydration, cardiovascular problems like low blood pressure, abnormal heart rhythms, heart failure, and in severe cases, heart attack. Neurological symptoms are like numbness, tingling, muscle weakness, confusion, seizures, coma. There could be something that would kind of come across as a cold, right? Sore throat, cough, breathing difficulties, and jaundice. And if you see some more modern day arsenic poisonings, arsenic's obviously a lot harder to get your hands on. Yeah. Trying to kill them slowly with it, and people can survive, although there'll be major, usually neurological deficit they'll live with for the rest of their life. But there's been ones where they've just continued to try to kill them slowly, and it's not working out. And they're just like, okay, what the hell? There's just no killing this guy or this woman. And then what they do is they just dump large, massive doses, and that usually does the trick because arsenic is in large doses is sudden. But if you don't die from it, it is a painful way to go. It's a lot of women's choice of murder, not just by arsenic, but all different types of poisoning, whether it be prescription drugs or now prescription drugs, because these type of chemicals are so hard to get their hands on. So they just moved over to things that are more, even aspirin, just more readily available.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's like, what are you going to have around? I think we kind of talked before, where it's like, what do we find very close at hand? So you have women cooking for their families or cooking for their spouses, for others, that great opportunity to do it very key.
Right.
So it's not like chasing after someone and trying to stab them or something.
Neat and tidy. That way you don't
It is.
clean it. Especially if you like it clean. You're not interested in cleaning up after if you like a nice tidy house. Who wants to mop up blood? The common one now is antifreeze. And from what I understand, I only heard this from third parties. Don't look at me like that. So apparently you can put it in things because it has apparently it tastes very sweet, and it's not terribly noticeable, but it's not as lethal as arsenic, but once it starts building up in the system, it can be deadly, and it can do the job maybe a little bit slower than you want it to, but it can get the job done. Now, cyanide, I think everybody knows from the spy movies, biting down the cyanide tablet.
Exactly.
If you get caught, cyanide is a little bit different than arsenic. You're going to get immediate. You don't suffer through a cyanide poisoning. It's over. If you live long enough, after you bite into the pill or get poisoned with it, and the biggest mistake in these poisoning deaths, if they do live, is that you're just not giving them enough. You got got your dosages all wrong. So
Right.
It's like, oh, you gotta up those dosages.
Right.
So with that, it's going to be headache, dizziness, weakness, confusion, nausea and vomiting, breathing problems, rapid or slow heart rate, chest pain or tightnesses, eye cheering and pain, excitement or restlessness. And you can see how a lot of these symptoms mimic a heart attack
All right.
or mimic other less nefarious type of disease.
There is some amount of similarity between cyanide and arsenic, it seems.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're again, either will get the job done. Cyanide, I just think is a little. I don't see too many people surviving cyanide poisonings. I guess good, if it's a low enough dosage. But again, you see where it's like cyanide is choice for being more immediate.
Well, and I guess it would be like, how more readily available would that have been versus like arsenic maybe?
Probably pretty, back in the day, probably very, because keep in mind, rats, vermin were a real concern at the time. And so whatever it took to get rid of them.
Right, because they were bringing in disease,
Right,
with the lifespan of people.
Exactly. So nobody's mind. So get all the cyanide, arsenic, whatever you need. And I think arsenic was also used to tan leather. These things have had purposes for which they were developed were for good reasons. Then they moved over to being used for not good reasons. So then you get like in severe cyanide poisoning, subconsciousness, seizures, cardiac arrest. The one thing that would probably stat if you saw a case of cyanide or arsenic poisoning, it would probably be more in physical changes, and you would see that you would know that it's not a heart attack or whatever. Hair loss, there's you can get with cyanide poisonings, cherry red skin. I already mentioned the bitter almond smell. Apparently only certain people can pick up that.
Interesting.
Those notes because you have to have a special sensory. There's lesions on your skin. It's doing its damage. There are people who have survived. There are, more so arsenic than I believe cyanide. But prolonged exposure to low levels. And I've seen documentary on a couple of spouses that have tried to kill their, usually a woman, husband, but this was actually an instance where it was a husband trying to kill his wife. And now she's paralyzed, she's got nerve damage where she can't feel, her sensory perception is off, and there's no one like that. It damages the systems that badly. And they can tell when these poisoners get impatient. It's very easy to tell how long they've been getting poisoned. They take a hair sample and they can cut it into certain slices and they put it under, and you can just tell like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and based on how much arsenic is deposited in the hair follicle. And I don't know if it's true or not, but it's my understanding that we all have traces of arsenic. But traces are a lot different than having like the one lady where it's 200 times the lethal limit. Yeah, somebody's giving that to you. Right. So let's talk about strychnine. If you want to keep it poisoned by strychnine, start looking for these symptoms: anxiety and restlessness, muscle stiffness and spasms starting in the neck and face, seizures that are triggered by any stimulus such as light, sound, or touch. There is opisthonosis, probably saying that wrong. If there's any doctors listening, if you could correct me, that would be fantastic. This word, opisthotonus, but layman's term is just the body arches backwards with the head and heels touching the ground. Wow, that sounds like The Exorcist. I think I'd run the other direction if I saw that. Trismus, which is a condition where the jaw muscles are tightly clenched. Is that what they call lockjaw? Yeah, I remember kids that have been talking about lockjaw. Yeah. Don't do this, don't do that, don't get lockjaw. And rhissus sardonicus, which is a grotesque involuntary smile. See, I don't want to see this strychnine poisoning. You don't really hear about it anymore. I don't know if strychnine is even available at all anymore. I don't think you could get strychnine for anything. Well, now I see why, because not only is it deadly, but it's scary as
well. And keep in mind, their homemade wine was laced with arsenic, strychnine, and just a pinch of cyanide. So I'm wondering the reason why we didn't see any bodies is because it would be really horrific to see.
If I saw somebody bent backwards with her head touching their heels with a grotesque smile, yeah, I'm not helping you. I don't know this to be the case, but has this been responsible for some of these, I'm air quoting, these demonic possessions that people have seen? And this is not anything you would be able to find in anything anymore. It would be hard pressed. And I think they keep these type of poisons on anything that goes into making them. There's a register. You have to have to be logged as a person who got it. So it's not just out there forever. Hey, I'd like to look
Interesting
that up.
idea.
I'd like to look into more of that, is because that's what that looks like. An
That
involuntary
would
grotesque
be-
smile. I'm going to look into that because I've never put the two together. I know mental illness was deemed demonic possessions back in the day.
Mhm.
Just because it was the only way they had to explain it. I'm wondering if this would scare the bejeebies right out of me.
Oh,
The first thing I'm
absolutely.
thinking is The Exorcist.
Wait.
Holy cows. So other symptoms, like you needed any. Those are just for fun. So nausea and vomiting, it sounds like across the board you're getting that. Diarrhea, fever, we're getting into a bad hangover here. Hyperhidrosis, which is excessive sweating. Tachycardia, which is a rapid heartbeat. And hypertension, high blood pressure.
So I think like those other symptoms, once again, those kind of relate to the other, the cyanide and arsenic, because it seems like, once again, there's a lot of similarities between them. But obviously there are certain things that really stand out for each and every one of them. And I feel like the strychnine ones are the ones that you're going to see most visibly.
But across the board, these sweet little eyes and these gentlemen just passing away and had the most peaceful smile. That did not happen. I mean, this isn't a scary movie or a scary play. But in reality, they're not sitting there, even if it's quick, they're going to have intense stomach pains. They're not just going to drop dead.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful before you go.
I think this is what it kind of goes down to this now, another area of topic, which was, were they being killed by kindness or was there a darker reason? I think initially the thought was, oh, okay, well, these are mercy killings. These are our charity cases. The aunts are just so sweet. Your first assumption is like, absolutely, it was mercy killings. They're there to like help others, no longer be alone and sad. But I think when you think about the pain and all the symptoms that are arising from the arsenic, the cyanide, the strychnine, what that causes, I don't know that mercy killing makes so much sense anymore. I mean, and if that's the case, if these aren't mercy killings, then that sweet facade masks a very sinister intent. And, maybe even a hate for men in general. So, I mean, there's something where you're going, because I think every time I've seen it, I'm like, oh, they're so cute. They're sweet little unassuming women and, they're just helping. But this new knowledge now that I'm having about these types of poisons and how the person would have to, like, what they would go through, that's not I think there'd be more pleasant ways to pass away than through these poisons. So now you're kind of, that's totally changed my mindset about these ladies now.
Yeah, because once I saw it the first, we're talking about 12. And they're even dozen.
Right.
I remember thinking, we have an even dozen. First time, let's just put it this way. Even if you got lucky once and it was just they keeled over, it didn't happen 12 times.
Right.
One of those times you had to have seen. And again, we're digging into something. That's not what you want part of the movie to be. I'm not picking the movie apart. I'm not watching this movie to see, Halloween. I'm not. That's not what I'm looking for. But the reality, and we've got where we have to suspend disbelief in a million different places. Let's face it. But I love suspending disbelief in this movie. Is that at one time, probably all times, they saw that it was excruciating.
Yeah.
And all the church services and funeral services in the world isn't going to change that. They saw that. And so, but I think that the thing is how you get around it is they're crazy.
Yeah.
They're not Teddy Roosevelt crazy, but they're crazy. And them getting to Happy Dale is exactly where they needed to be and then they get so upset about putting a stranger next to a Methodist and messing up their, it's just, they're just nuts.
Right.
Because poisoners have it all over the place. You have the angel of mercy that was the nurse in the hospital, and he thought they were suffering, so he killed all those people, and he was putting can't remember exactly. It wasn't poison, but it was something which is scarier. Insulin. That's what it was. And they started piecing together that the murder rate or the death rate on his shift was higher than everybody else. But he thought he was doing a kindness because they were dying anyway, or they were sick or whatever and alone, didn't have any family come to see them. And those poisoners, I don't think there's any good type, but I mean, they've kind of sometimes hadn't had their poison. I think is what you mentioned earlier when they had cooking or rats or anything is a crime of opportunity because it's a readily available. You don't have to go buy a gun. most of these things are something they have easy access to, a nurse, which is insulin. Now they have to check that out. And there's actually a movie out there about his colleague that turned him in because he would empty the vials and put the vials in the back of the locked cabinet. It's a crime of opportunity because he had easy access to insulin. Insulin is a bad one because it's really hard. The body develops insulin naturally. And so that's going to be a hard one to catch. And it metabolizes rather quickly. So that's a tough one. And that Von Bulow, that's how he, she ended up in a coma and get murdered, is the insulin. Those poisoners, but compared to this, that's almost a kindness because it is a kindness because insulin, basically, there is no pain. You're just down for the count. You're comparing poisons. They'd have been better off for lab. They
had a lab. They had a lab that had poisons within the lab. So they're going to take whatever's in the lab, whatever poisons that are in there, mixing it up, right? Because what was it? Martha was a great mixer, right?
She was very.
So being able to pull that all together and coming up with this new cocktail. Yeah.
I mean, because you have. I mean, again, it's opportunity because the Dorothea Puente, which is another female serial killer in Sacramento, very notorious, and she had a boarding house, and her body count was 9, and she was taking their Social Security checks.
Oh wow!
So it was, it wasn't a mercy killing; it was for greed. And so she's mixing things just that you would find in your medicine cabinet, codeine and histamines. There were gentlemen in the house's medicine that was made for them, mixing it up and putting it over here. And the only reason, they must have been crazy. Well, even if you were going to say they weren't crazy, how they think that 60 people are just going to just start dropping dead within a span of 2 years and nobody's going to notice. Right. 9 people. And how she got caught was not because of anybody missed these men that didn't have anybody. Right. The reason she got caught was cashing the checks. She might have not been caught for a very long time, and had she not been cashing their checks. Of course, the family's like, what the hell? And cashing the checks long after they had since gone. So she's just plucking things out of the medicine cabinet.
I think, that kind of segues into, talked about, pretty much crazy. There's definitely evidence to suggest that there is a connection between mental health, actually drug use, and also trauma in the lives of a lot of female serial killers. So, in terms of like the trauma and abuse, there's a significant portion of female serial killers that have a history of being either physically and or sexually abused, especially in their childhood. And that childhood abuse can obviously lead to feelings of maybe humiliation and helplessness. And there are some theories that suggest that could be a factor that serial killers are attempting to replicate in their victims later in life. That type of trauma that's experienced can also influence how they select victims, the method of killing. So you might actually have some female serial killers who target victims who resemble their abusers or they see that person so there's something about them that angers them, and that's who they'll go after.
They feel in their mind they're regaining control.
One of the things that was mentioned in film was when Jonathan mentioned to Aunt Martha that I see you still wearing your high collar that hides a scar where acid burned her. And you're thinking, oh, well, it was an accident in the lab or something, or maybe it's something more sinister. Maybe there was, think about Jonathan. Jonathan was physically restraining his other brother and sticking pins underneath his fingernails. So you got to wonder what kind of household that was, where that seemed maybe commonplace, perhaps. We don't know. But it made a little bit of a darker image, I think, of that household, especially prior to seeing that we're seeing.
This movie is the most campiest fun you're going to have about serial killers ever. You're never, and I'm not trying to change it into some dark foreboding movie, but if you do dig into the movie, it starts to get a very dark undertone.
Like this was based off of a real life event, story. There is that kind of basis at least,
and it's happened in recent times. So while there's some places you have to suspend disbelief, these are things that really happened. They really did happen based on somebody that the guy who wrote the play had read about in the paper.
Right. No.
So absolutely. This is one of those based on a true story that never said it was based on a true story.
So kind of talking further about the mental health, there are studies that have been indicated that 40% of female serial killers have shown evidence of mental illness. And so there's some common diagnoses that have been identified. One is post-traumatic stress disorder, so PTSD, likely stemming from the childhood trauma, and that can contribute to emotional instability, hypervigilance, a distorted perception of threats, maybe potentially leading to violence in some cases. And then you also have some personality disorders, such as borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, which was previously known as a psychopathy. The borderline personality, that one is characterized by having a very unstable self-image, maybe impulsive behavior, intense mood swings, and difficulties with relationships. And that's often linked with self-destructive behavior. And then the antisocial personality disorder involves a disregard for others' feelings, potentially manifested as violence, deceit, and lack of remorse. Now, keeping in mind, having these disorders doesn't automatically mean you're going to have violent behavior. And obviously, that doesn't mean you're going to be a serial killer. Thinking about in terms of drug and alcohol abuse, typically those are more common in serial killers compared to the general population. And substance use and mental health disorders can also have common risk factors, including trauma and adverse social environments. And then, you have some female serial killers who are using drugs or alcohol before or even during their killings. So it might be linked to impulsivity or maybe just disinhibiting effect.
Right.
Medicating. Exactly. So these are kind of more generalizations about people with mental health issues and some of them with their history of trauma and substance abuse. Keeping in mind, serial killing is very complex and there's a lot of multiple contributing factors. These are just things that are noticeable, but that's not to say that if you have any of those in your background that you're automatically going to go ahead and be a serial killer.
Yeah, we're all still unique individuals.
Absolutely.
And I know our listeners probably know this already. We've talked about quite a few female serial killers, but overall, it's a rarity. It is mostly exclusive to males. So that's why when you do see Eileen Warren is because that woman didn't have a chance to talk about abuse and everything that she went through. But that's why it gets the attention that it gets because women are not known to do this, but they do. And there's probably ones that do it that get away with it.
Right.
But it's still predominantly males, actually white males. Mm-hmm. That, which is why, there's so much profiling and studies about this is why is this? And it's not just American. One of the most prolific serial killers ever was Russian. What he did was would just chill you to the bone. But that's why you have to look at this as like what all of these things factor in. And it does with men too. But it's chilling of how this whole cocktail of all these things come together and create this type of person. And then particularly women, because women I think we can chip a lot of our testosterone, nothing against men and testosterone, but testosterone is more of a rage hormone, not even a rage hormone, but it's a more aggressive hormone. It has to be for us to survive the species. So it's very interesting as to why you see women doing the poisoning thing. Right. You don't see women on clock towers mowing down 60 people with a rifle. I don't think it's ever happened to my knowledge anywhere on the planet. Right. Why? I mean, there's got to. So, what is the chip that does this?
Because it seems more personable, right, with the women, right? Because it is something. It's you've done something to me, right? Or that perceivedness of you've done something to me. Versus the male is going from shooting just random people just in rage or what have you. Like they don't have that personal connection, and I don't know if that makes it easier. It might be the case.
Well, when male serial killers, or any type killers, male killers, it's personal. It usually involves strangling because that's when they know that it's kind of personal because it takes a long time to choke you. Beyond what you see in movies and stuff, it doesn't happen in 2 minutes. Somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes, unless you break the hyoid bone, it takes a while to do that. You have to look somebody in their eyes and watch and literally choke the life out of them for 5 to 7 minutes. Think about that. Let's just sit and watch.
That's a long time.
That's not any way you're going to go out. Right. I mean, we're worried about all the ways we're going to. I don't have the time.
Yes, don't worry. I will not be strangling you.
Thank you.
I may say I wish I could strangle you, but I don't have the time.
I don't have that kind of patience.
So kind of tying in that mental health, that drug use, the trauma, coming back to Amy Duggan Archer Gilligan, so the person that was the basis for this movie, there's evidence that her family had a lot of mental illness. Her siblings, cousins, father, all reportedly had received some kind of psychiatric care or were committed in institutions. Also, supposedly, Amy had a morphine addiction. Her daughter had testified at court that her mother had been addicted to morphine since she was 13 years old.
Wow.
Or since the daughter was 13, and reportedly had consumed very high dosages daily. Amy also had very bizarre behavior and delusions. So there were witnesses and family members that had described her as engaging in very unusual and erratic behavior, having imaginary telephone conversations, experiencing difficulty walking and talking strangely, developing paranoia and delusions of being persecuted, obsessively hiring and sending empty horse-drawn cabs to funerals. There's been some experts who have looked at, her case file, her behaviors, and her cognitive patterns, and seen that those probably would have aligned with someone who had schizophrenia, and noted that the substance abuse, which is also common with those who have schizophrenia, so can worsen as the disease progresses. So the fact that you have a huge amount of family members that have a lot of mental illness, could there have been some trauma, related to that, as well as having your own mental illness and being substance abuse happening? So these things that are factoring in. As well as maybe opportunity. Hey, I need to survive. How do I do that? Right.
Yeah, it's back to the nature versus nurture, right? Why these things happen. And the shame of it is, in current times, she probably could have been treated for a lot of this. Mm-hmm. And the morphine makes sense. They self-medicate and probably come to. And schizophrenia is very much genetic, and to quiet the voices in her head, just to drown out the noise.
Well, with that, this actually wraps up our episode. So we'll go ahead and provide a summary of today's podcast. So today we tasted blueberry wine from Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurant, and we paired the wine with the 1944 film Arsenic and Old Lace. The film was directed by Frank Capra and starred Cary Grant. And Arsenic and Old Lace was already a stage hit in Broadway in 1941, and that included Boris Karloff as Jonathan Brewster. The Brewster aunts and Teddy were also actors on the Broadway play. Once the film was completed in 1941, they actually went back on stage. The film itself actually wasn't released to the public until 1944, so that the play could actually run its course on Broadway. The story was based on America's most prolific female serial killer. We wrapped up our session discussing the serial killer, Amy Duggan Archer Gilligan. Her murder weapon of choice was poison, and we end up talking about the various poisons, not only arsenic, but also strychnine and cyanide, which were the 3 ingredients part of the Brewster aunts concoction. We talked about potential of mercy killings, but maybe not so much. And then we also talked a lot about mental health, drug use, trauma, and how those kind of factors could contribute to becoming a female serial killer, and how that aligned with Amy Duggan Archer Gilligan, and maybe those were some factors that actually led to her becoming a serial killer. So, final thought.
Arsenic and Old Lace is a screwball horror comedy, a satire of murder stories, and a showcase of Capra's directorial timing.
It's also a reminder that the quiet ones, the church ladies, the tea brewing aunts, they might just be a little bit more dangerous than you thought.
And so the next time you visit your grandma, maybe you check the window seat.
This brings us to the end of this podcast episode. If you enjoyed the Booby Trap podcast, continue to listen to our podcast episodes and bonus accessory reels. Like, share, follow, and interact with us on your listening app and social media channels. We've also curated a Spotify music list and YouTube video channel for each episode, so be sure to check them out. Please tell your friends and family. Also, if you have any wine or film that you'd like us to pair, please let us know and we'll do our best to do so. You can access everything through our website, boobytrappodcast.podbean.com.
And finally, for this episode's teaser to be answered on social media, what does Arsenic and Old Lace imply about murderous tendency? Is it A, inherited, B, unavoidable. C, normalized. D, learned behavior. E, all of the above. So, yeah.
Until next time, keep your corks tight, your glasses full, and beware of your crazy relatives. Cheers!